The first time I realized my brother had betrayed me, it was because of the smell, burnt metal, and something acrid, like scorched oil, wafting in through the open windows of my workshop. The smell didn't belong here. My shop had always smelled faintly of sawdust, varnish, and the faint sweetness of the old cedar beams that held the place together. That day, though, it smelled like someone had taken a blowtorch to my livelihood. I was halfway through fitting a custom mahogany countertop for a wealthy client's lake house when my phone buzzed, not once, but 5 times in quick succession. Turn on the news. The first message read, "Sent from Dean, a carpenter I'd mentored years ago." The next was from a supplier. "Eli, is it true?" The rest were just question marks, frantic and insistent. I wiped my hands on my apron, crossed the workshop, and flipped on the battered old TV that hung in the corner, the one I kept around for background noise on long nights. A local reporter stood in front of a charred shell of a warehouse. My warehouse. Its roof collapsed inward like a broken spine. The screen showed flashes of firefighters dousing the last smoldering beams. Then came the kicker. Authorities suspect arson, citing evidence of an accelerant. Sources tell us the warehouse was uninsured due to a recent policy lapse. That last line hit me harder than the sight of the flames. My insurance hadn't lapsed. I'd paid every premium on time for 12 years. I grabbed my file drawer, yanked out the folder, and there it was, an empty envelope where the latest policy renewal should have been. Someone had removed it. Someone with access. Someone who knew exactly how to gut me without lifting a finger to help put out the fire. The police came that afternoon, their questions polite but pointed. Did I have enemies? Did I owe anyone money? Could it have been an accident? I told them no to each, though my mind was already drifting to one name. Aaron Mercer. My brother. My business partner. My blood. Aaron and I had built Mercer & Sons from a rented storage unit and a second-hand lathe into one of the most sought-after custom furniture businesses in the state. We'd been featured in design magazines, landed contracts with high-end developers, even turned down offers to expand because we preferred staying small and personal. At least, that's what I thought. For months, Aaron had been growing restless, talking about scaling up and going corporate. I'd brushed it off as harmless ambition. But the fire, the missing policy, and the sudden, out-of-town trip Aaron had taken 3 days before, it all clicked into place with sickening precision. That night, after the last of the investigators left, I drove to Aaron's house. His porch light was on, but no one answered the door. His mailbox, however, was stuffed with unopened envelopes. I flipped through them until one caught my eye. A letter from a property development firm we'd met with once, a firm I'd turned down flat when they'd suggested buying us out. The return address made my pulse quicken. Inside my truck, under the pale wash of a street lamp, I tore the envelope open. It was a formal contract. An agreement to purchase Mercer & Sons brand, client list, and designs for a sum that made my stomach twist. Not because it was low, but because it was exactly the kind of money Aaron would torch a lifetime of trust for. At the bottom, in slanted ink, was his signature. Just his. No mention of me. No co-owner's sign-off. When I called him, he answered on the third ring, his voice smooth as lacquer. "Eli, I was going to talk to you. Talk to me about selling the company behind my back? Or about the fire you somehow didn't mention?" My voice cracked, equal parts rage and disbelief. He sighed, as if I was the one being unreasonable. "It's business. The fire was an accident, probably electrical. And the sale? Look, you've been holding us back. We could triple our income in a year, but you're too sentimental about handcrafting everything yourself. This way, we both get a payout. Clean break." "You think burning down our workshop is a clean break?" "Careful," he said, his tone sharpening. "Accusations like that could land you in trouble." I stared at the phone, gripping it so hard my knuckles ached. That was when I knew Aaron hadn't just betrayed me. He'd set me up to take the fall. The next morning, I found a notice taped to my workshop's locked front gate. "By court order, all business operations are suspended pending investigation." Signed by a judge whose name I recognized from the county courthouse. The same courthouse where Aaron's new partners wielded influence like a hammer. I wasn't just out of a business. I was out of options. But as I stood there in the pale, smoky morning light, the smell of ash still heavy in the air, something inside me shifted. Aaron thought he'd written the ending of my story. He had no idea I was about to start a new chapter, one he'd never see coming. 2 days after the court order shut down my workshop, I woke to the sound of tires crunching on gravel outside my house. My stomach tightened instantly. No one came by unannounced except for trouble. Through the window, I saw a black SUV idling in the driveway, its tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. I opened the door before they had the chance to knock, determined not to look like someone waiting for bad news. 2 men in plain suits stepped out, their expressions already carved into that neutral blend of authority and suspicion. They introduced themselves as Detectives Hammond and Ruiz from the county's arson investigation unit, and without much ceremony, they asked if I'd be willing to answer a few clarifying questions. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table my father had built 40 years ago, the wood worn smooth from years of Sunday dinners and long conversations. Hammond, the older one with a permanent frown line between his brows, asked about my whereabouts the night of the fire. I told them I'd been at home alone, working late on some design sketches. Ruiz, younger and more direct, flipped open a file and slid a photograph toward me. It showed the charred remains of a gasoline canister, partially melted but still identifiable. This was found near the east loading dock, he said. Traces of fuel were found in multiple spots inside. Looks like a timed ignition. I felt my pulse climb into my throat. So you're saying this wasn't accidental? Hammond studied me for a long moment before answering. We're saying whoever did this knew the building and wanted it gone. And here's the tricky part, Mr. Mercer. Security footage from a traffic cam 2 blocks away shows your truck passing the area around 10:42 p.m. that night. That stopped me cold. My truck hadn't been anywhere near the shop that night. But as Ruiz leaned back, watching me like a hawk, I realized exactly how easy it would have been for Aaron to borrow my spare key, kept in a drawer at the workshop, then use it to get a copy made. A truck just like mine, same make, model, and color, would be more than enough to plant doubt. I wasn't there, I said firmly. If you've got footage, then someone's using a truck that looks like mine. We'll need to confirm your alibi, Hammond replied, closing the folder. And until we do, we'd advise you not to leave town. When they left, the silence in the house felt heavier than before. Not just because I was now under suspicion, but because I could see Aaron's fingerprints all over this. If the insurance lapse was the first knife in my back, this was him twisting it. I spent the rest of that day calling in favors, friends, old clients, anyone who might have seen me the night of the fire, but it was useless. I'd been home, unseen, no witnesses to vouch for me. That evening, I tried calling Aaron again. This time he didn't answer, but a voicemail arrived an hour later, short and venomous. You need to stop calling me, Eli. You're digging yourself into a hole you can't climb out of. If the cops come asking, I'll tell them exactly what I think happened. It was the first time in my life I truly understood the phrase cold fury. My own brother, willing to watch me burn for his payday. That night, I drove by the charred remains of our workshop. It was fenced off now, the twisted skeleton of the building still faintly smelling of ash and gasoline. A security guard leaned against a pickup by the gate, sipping coffee. I didn't stop. I just sat there for a moment, staring through the fence, feeling like I was at the funeral of something I'd built with my own hands. 2 more days passed before my bank called. The woman on the line was apologetic but firm. 3 checks written from the business account had bounced, all made out to cash for amounts that added up to nearly $14,000. I told her I hadn't written them. She said my signature was on all of them. That was when I drove straight to the county records office. If Aaron was selling the company, there had to be a paper trail. The clerk found the preliminary sale agreement in the system, not yet finalized but signed by Aaron and the buyers. On the 3rd page, buried in legal jargon, was a clause stating that any outstanding debts or liabilities tied to the company would be settled by the remaining partner after the sale, meaning me. He'd arranged the sale so that I'd get the debts, he'd get the money, and if the arson charges stuck, I'd also get prison. I left the office with the copy in hand, my head buzzing. This wasn't just betrayal. This was premeditated annihilation. I knew now that going to the police with my suspicions would be useless without proof, and proof was something Aaron had carefully kept out of my reach. That night, I called Dean, the carpenter who'd texted me the morning of the fire. He'd always been loyal, someone I could trust. Over a long conversation in the back booth of a half-empty diner, I told him everything. Dean listened quietly, only interrupting to ask for details. When I finished, he shook his head slowly. I've heard some things, he said, about Aaron meeting with those developers weeks before the fire. Always without you. And a buddy of mine swears he saw him at a storage yard the night before the fire, loading something heavy into a truck. Could have been nothing, could have been something. Dean's words planted the first seed of an idea. Dangerous, risky, but maybe the only way to fight back. If Aaron wanted me buried under debt and suspicion, I'd need to dig in the other direction and find what he was hiding. I wasn't ready to tell Dean the full plan yet, mostly because it wasn't fully formed. But I left that diner with something I hadn't had in days, the beginnings of a way forward. The next morning, a plain white envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, no name, just a single sheet of paper inside. It was a printed email chain between Aaron and someone from the developer's office. The subject line read, "Insurance confirmation." And in one of Aaron's replies, he wrote, "Policy will be canceled by Friday. Building clear for next phase." I stood in my driveway holding that page, my hands trembling, not with fear this time, but with the electric pulse of opportunity. Whoever had sent this had just given me the first real crack in Aaron's armor. The envelope had been dropped into my mailbox like a lit fuse. No fingerprints, no note. Just that printed email chain that made my brother's guilt a matter of typed fact. I spent half the morning staring at it, weighing the risk of running straight to the police against the very real possibility that Aaron's new friends at the development firm had already salted the earth in every official channel. I needed leverage, not just evidence. And leverage comes from knowing more than the other side expects you to know. Around noon, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was low and deliberate, the kind of voice that measures its words like currency. "Mr. Mercer," the caller said, "I think we have a mutual problem. My name's Nestor. I work nights across from your old workshop." I remembered Detective Feld mentioning a night shift janitor who had seen someone leaving my building after midnight. "I saw who went in that night," he continued. "It wasn't you, and I've got something that proves it." I met him that evening at the southeast corner of the shuttered industrial park, the air sharp with the lingering smell of smoke and cold metal. Nestor was a wiry man in his late 50s, the kind of guy whose uniform looked permanently pressed even after a long shift. He carried a battered cardboard box under his arm like it was full of glass. "I've been cleaning up after other people's messes for 30 years, he said as he handed me the box. "But I know the difference between a mess and a crime scene. You should too." Inside the box was a stack of shredded paper. No, not shredded, pieced back together with almost obsessive precision. Purchase orders, emails, a signed letter from Aaron to the developers dated 3 weeks before the fire, all talking about clearing the site and fast-tracking the transition. But the piece de resistance was a photocopy of an ID badge, mine, except the photo was slightly grainy, and the lamination bore the faint ripple of a reprint. "I found that badge outside the east dock door," Nestor said. "Not the night of the fire, but the night before. Dropped in the alley like it fell out of someone's pocket. Whoever it was, they swiped in with it at least twice that night. Cameras caught them coming and going." "Why didn't you give this to the police?" I asked. He smirked without humor. "Son, I've been around long enough to know when the cops already have their suspect. You were wearing the target the second the place went up. But if you're going to fight this, you'll need allies who aren't on anyone's payroll but their own." Nestor agreed to testify if it came to that, but he also had a warning. "You've got maybe a week before they lock you into a narrative you can't crawl out of. Use it." I went home with the box in my passenger seat and the kind of restless energy that makes a man do things he'd usually talk himself out of. The first thing I did was call Dean. I told him about the badge, the pieced-together documents, the email chain. "This is it," I said. "This is the crack we need." Dean didn't hesitate. "Then we hit back before they know we're armed. You ever heard of Morgan Keene?" The name rang a bell. A freelance investigative journalist who'd once done a brutal expose on a major construction company skimming disaster relief funds. She'd been blacklisted from half the industry, but her stories had teeth. Dean set up a meeting the next day at a quiet coffee shop off the highway. Morgan arrived in jeans and a leather jacket, her hair pulled back, eyes sharp enough to cut steel. She listened without interrupting as I laid out everything. Aaron's secret meetings, the insurance cancellation, the forged badge, the development firm's offer. When I slid the email chain across the table, her mouth curved into a dangerous smile. "This isn't just a story," she said. "This is a corporate hit job with a family betrayal twist. People eat this up." I told her I didn't care about headlines. I cared about dismantling the machine that was grinding me under its wheels. "Then we make it work for both of us," she replied. "You get the truth out, I get the byline. And if I'm right, exposing this will scare the development firm enough to cut ties with your brother before you ever see the inside of a courtroom." We spent the next 3 days assembling a war chest of evidence. Nestor's testimony, Dean's account of Aaron's late-night storage yard visit, the paper trail showing the developer's transition plan before the fire. Morgan even tracked down a former Carradine Hollow employee who confirmed that Sloan Avery, their in-house counsel, was known for manufacturing exit strategies for stubborn holdouts in negotiations. She had, apparently, a signature move, using a slightly altered email address to intercept and redirect critical communications. That was when everything snapped into perfect focus. The altered email in the insurance records hadn't just been Aaron's idea. Sloan had done it. She was the one who made sure I wouldn't see the cancellation notice until it was too late. And she had the skill to make it all look clean. On the 4th day, Morgan handed me a flash drive. "This is everything," she said. "Backups of the files, the statements, the interviews. If something happens to me, 3 other people have copies. So let's make sure nothing happens to either of us. That night, I drove past Aaron's house. His lights were on, and through the window, I could see him at the table, laughing with someone, probably celebrating how neatly he thought the trap had been sprung. But the thing about traps is, once you know where they're set, you can decide who steps into them. I parked down the street, the flash drive heavy in my pocket, and for the first time since the fire, I felt the balance shifting. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was moving pieces on the board. And Aaron? He was about to find out what it felt like to be cornered. Morgan's plan was aggressive, risky, and exactly what I'd been waiting for. She wanted to drop the story in one explosive hit. No teasers, no polite fact-checking phone calls that would give Sloane Avery or Aaron time to plug the leaks. You go at them hard, she said, her voice low but electric as we sat in her cramped apartment surrounded by stacks of file boxes. You hit them before they know you've loaded the gun. One day you're the suspect, the next you're the guy exposing the whole rotten thing. The public loves a reversal. We picked a date, 3 days out. That window would give her enough time to write, verify, and package the piece for the outlets still willing to run her work. It would also give me time to bait Aaron into making a move that would tie him even tighter to the mess. You're going to let him think you're panicking, she said. People like your brother can smell fear, and it makes them sloppy. You need him sloppy. The next morning, I called Aaron. My tone was controlled, but just shaky enough to pass as someone circling the drain. We need to meet, I said. This is getting out of hand. If we can come to some sort of agreement, maybe we can stop the police from tearing into both of us. I suggested we meet at the old mill outside town, a place we used to sneak into as kids. Neutral ground, nostalgic, perfect for lulling him. He didn't answer right away, but 2 hours later he texted, "Fine. Tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Morgan insisted we plant an observer. Dean volunteered without hesitation. I'll keep back far enough not to spook him, he said. But if he tries something. He let the sentence hang, and I didn't ask him to finish it. The following day stretched like wire ready to snap. I spent it organizing the final pieces of Morgan's evidence packet. Nestor's reconstructed documents, the forged ID badge, the insurance email chain, even screenshots of Sloane's known double-letter email trick. Morgan worked in her corner, hammering out the final draft of the article, her fingers flying over the keyboard like she was carving the words into stone. By late afternoon, she slid a USB stick across the table to me. Here's the story, she said. If something goes sideways tonight, you get this to the press yourself. When I pulled up to the mill that night, the air was sharp with frost. The skeletal remains of the building loomed against the dark sky, windows like empty eyes. My headlights caught Aaron leaning against his truck, hands in his coat pockets. He smiled when he saw me, but it didn't reach his eyes. I didn't think you'd actually show, he said. I'm not interested in playing this game anymore, I replied, keeping my voice level. You win. You've got the deal, the developers, the money. Just leave me out of whatever else you're planning. He laughed softly, shaking his head like I was a naive child. It's not that simple, Eli. You've already been painted into this picture. If I cut you loose now, I look guilty. You have to stay in it, at least until it's over. That's not going to happen. His smile thinned. Then you're giving me no choice. He reached into his coat, and for a split second I thought he might be pulling a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a small envelope and tossed it at my feet. Inside were photocopies of evidence, fabricated bank transfers, forged messages implying I'd coordinated the arson. This goes to Detective Feld tomorrow unless you play ball, he said. I crouched, picked up the papers, and looked at them as if I was rattled. You've really thought this through, haven't you? You always underestimated me, he said. That's your problem. Behind him, I caught the faintest glint of movement in the trees. Dean, keeping his promise. I knew the tiny mic clipped under my collar was feeding every word to him, and to the small recorder in his truck. I also knew Aaron couldn't resist gloating. And Sloane? I asked, keeping my voice casual. Does she get a cut of this? Or is she just doing it for the thrill? His mouth twitched, not much, but enough. She gets her fee. And she gets to watch me burn down the life you built while you stand there pretending you're still in control. It was exactly the admission I needed. A thin one, but in context with everything else Morgan had gathered, it was dynamite. I stepped closer, closing the space between us. You're going to regret this, I said quietly. He grinned. No, Eli. You are. I turned and walked back to my truck without another word. Dean texted a single thumbs-up emoji as I drove away, meaning the recording was clean and clear. Morgan was waiting when I arrived back at her apartment. I played the audio for her, Aaron's voice dripping with arrogance as he tied himself to Sloane and the whole scheme. This seals it, she said. We run it tomorrow morning. The next 12 hours were a blur of preparation. Morgan uploaded the story to multiple outlets with a timed release set for 6 a.m. Dean made backup copies of the audio and video. Nestor agreed to be named as a source, saying he was too old to be scared anymore. I barely slept, lying awake and imagining the look on Aaron's face when the world saw him for what he was. At exactly 6:03, my phone began to explode with notifications. Morgan's story hit the wire like a thunderclap. Local outlets picked it up first, then regional, then a couple of national blogs hungry for a scandal that combined arson, corporate greed, and family betrayal. She'd named names: Aaron's, Sloane's, Carradine Hollow's, and laid out the evidence piece by piece. The audio clip of Aaron bragging in the mill was embedded in every version of the article. By 9 a.m., I got my first call from Detective Felt. Her tone was markedly different this time. "Mr. Mercer, I think we need to talk again," she said. "And you might want to bring that box of evidence with you." But the call I was waiting for came half an hour later, from Aaron. His voice was tight, frantic. "You need to fix this," he hissed. "Take the story down. Tell them it's a misunderstanding. You're ruining me." I let the silence stretch, savoring it. "No, Aaron," I said finally. "You did that all by yourself." And I hung up. By noon, the Milltown gossip machine had gone into overdrive. Only this time it wasn't my name getting dragged through the soot, it was Aaron's. Every local radio station, every cafe conversation, every group text seemed to carry his voice from that mill recording, playing over and over until it became the soundtrack of his undoing. Sloane Avery had gone silent, but the development firm issued a statement by mid-afternoon claiming they'd terminated all relationships with both her and Aaron. It was as transparent as it was desperate. They were sawing off the infected limb before the rot reached the rest of the body. Detective Feld met me at the station just after lunch. She didn't waste time on small talk. "We've pulled the building's full security logs and compared them to your bank statements," she said. "You're clear. Completely. The DA's dropping you from the case." She slid a release form across the table, but her eyes stayed on me, weighing me like she had in our first meeting. "Your brother's going to be looking at multiple charges: insurance fraud, arson, conspiracy. I'd advise you to keep your distance." I signed without hesitation. "I've kept my distance for years," I said. "I just didn't realize how far I needed to go." When I walked out of the station, Dean was leaning against his truck, grinning like he'd just won a quiet bet. "Heard the good news," he said. "You're free." I told him the news was better than that. Morgan's story had gone viral. A larger investigative outlet had picked it up, offering to collaborate with her for a follow-up. She'd get her byline. Nestor would get the satisfaction of seeing justice nudge a little closer, and Aaron would get exactly what he'd earned. That night, I got one last call from my mother. Her voice was strained, brittle. "He's saying you set him up," she said. "That you framed your own brother." I closed my eyes, leaning against the wall. "You believe him?" There was a pause on the line, the kind that could hold a lifetime's worth of decisions. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she whispered. "That's fine," I said, "because the truth doesn't need your permission." I told her I loved her, because even if she never believed me, I wouldn't let Aaron take that from me too. Then I ended the call, not out of anger, but because I was done bleeding for someone else's lies. Over the next week, the fallout only widened. Aaron was arrested on a Tuesday morning, wearing the same smug smile in his mugshot that he'd worn the night at the mill. Only now it looked smaller, brittle. Sloane was subpoenaed, her legal career already in free fall. Carradine Hollow's stock took a hit after Morgan's follow-up exposed their history of negotiation tactics. The workshop site, still fenced off and charred, was officially released back to me, though rebuilding there felt like planting a garden in a graveyard. Instead, I took the insurance settlement that came through after my name was cleared and bought a smaller space on the edge of town. Dean and I started drawing up plans, not for Mercer and Sons, but for something new, something that couldn't be hijacked by greed hiding behind a family name. The day the keys to the new place landed in my hand, I stood in the empty doorway for a long time, breathing in the smell of unpainted drywall and possibility. It wasn't victory in the storybook sense. There was no parade, no moment where the villain begged for mercy. It was quieter than that, and maybe better. I had my life back, my work, my name, and the knowledge that Aaron would be spending years in a place where every door locked from the outside. Morgan visited that evening, dropping off a framed print of the headline that had changed everything. "Local brother cleared in arson scheme. Evidence points to business partner." She grinned when she handed it to me. "A reminder," she said, "that even the best-laid traps can catch the wrong animal if you know where to stand." I hung it on the wall of my office, not as a trophy, but as a warning, to myself, to anyone who walked through my door, that trust is a tool like any other. In the right hands, it builds. In the wrong hands, it burns. And as I locked up that first night, keys heavy in my palm, I realized the real revenge wasn't the article or the arrest or even Aaron's fall. The real revenge was standing in a place he could never touch again, knowing I'd rebuilt without him, and knowing he'd have to live with the fact that, for the first time in our lives, I'd finished the job without letting him leave his mark on it.